The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Ontario is, as the song goes, a place to stand and a place to grow. How should cities such as Hamilton do that? Well, tonight we'll dip into the lively debates underway in the Hammer and find out why similar issues may be coming to a city near you. Also, we'll hear what the Toronto Foundation's Vital Signs report found this year as it measured the impacts of COVID-19 on people in the provincial capital. It's Wednesday, October 13th, and that's ahead on the agenda. Ontario cities, especially mid-sized cities, are growing. That can be a good thing, but how to find space for new residents is up for debate. Hamilton is currently a case in point. Here to explain, in Steeltown, Tevye Morrow. He's a reporter and editor with the Hamilton Spectator. And Tevye, it's great to have you on the line from the Steel City. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks very much for having me here.
Not at all. It's good to have you. What started this debate in Hamilton to begin with?
Well, basically, it's a complex situation that has had many twists and turns, but the Ontario government has asked municipalities in the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which includes Hamilton, places like Peterborough, Niagara Falls, all the way up to Orillia, to plan for growth up to the year 2050. And basically, that means, in Hamilton's case, according to provincial projections, the city can expect another 230,000 people, bringing it to around 800,000 people over 30 years. So the city has been engaged in this complex planning exercise to try and fit all that growth within the city boundary. City planners, however, have said, look, this is a lot to fit into our city boundary. And we think, based on the provincial methodology, which is based on a market-based approach to what people would likely want to have in a type of home, whether it's a single-family home, a condominium, or even a townhouse, or row housing. We think that we're going to need an urban boundary expansion into rural lands of about 1,300 hectares. So that is what is driving the debate, and some anti-sprawl people, as they call themselves, have said, look, that's not good. We need to preserve this farmland, and in the context of a climate emergency, we need to try and prevent any sprawl and to keep carbon emissions down. And of course, this also affects things like infrastructure costs. If you start expanding your city, it's going to cost the city more to pay for things like pipes and roads and fire facilities, for example. However, on the other side of the coin, some of the landowners up there, property developers, are saying, look, we've been sitting on these properties in some cases for decades, and we want to develop them. We believe that Hamilton needs more of these ground-oriented homes, as they call them, to increase the supply, which in turn will alleviate what is an affordability crisis. And that, in a nutshell, is what's happening. City Council has to, at some point soon, sign off on what Hamilton's land needs will be, which will determine whether we have this boundary expansion, or if we hold the urban boundary fixed, as some of the anti-sprawl people are advocating.
Okay, that lays out the issue nicely, but of course it all depends. Billions of dollars of potential development, billions of dollars of mass transit, lots of important decisions really are all based on whether or not that 230,000 figure over the next 30 years is accurate. How reliable do you think that number is?
It's a good question. We've certainly heard from city officials who have said, look, past population projections in particular for Hamilton, have been lowballed or highballed. They've been accurate. We've never reached those targets. So this kind of raises the question of the provincial policy, the provincial approach to the whole issue. There has been some criticism that the province has expanded the time horizon to plan for growth to 2050. So that's an extra 10 years than was previously asked of municipalities. So if you combine that expanded time horizon to the fact that the projections could be too high, the argument is that it's manufacturing the need for a boundary expansion.
Gotcha. So essentially we've got these two visions here, the ambitious density being one, no urban expansion being the other. I presume the Hamilton Spectator has obviously thoroughly looked into this. Has the paper editorially come out on one side or the other on this issue?
I think our editorial stance has been there's been some criticism of expanding the boundary needlessly if we don't have to. You're right. There's a lot of debate about what the right thing to do is here, and I think city councillors are feeling the pressure from the development industry and their agents who have made presentations and sent letters in, but also from this huge swell of concern from a coalition of residents and a coalition of like-minded agencies who have said, look, we can't expand the urban boundary. Even if the city is saying this is, a small percentage of the actual rural land that makes up Hamilton, it's still chipping away at valuable farmland and also increasing our carbon emissions.
Do you have any sense right now, Tevye, about which way the majority of members of Hamilton City Council are leaning?
That's a good question. I think there's a variety of opinions. Some councillors have said, look, I'm totally against an urban boundary expansion, but they haven't committed one way to this particular question. Others have said, we're constantly feeling the pressure of individual planning decisions that we make all the time. So, for example, if we have an application to build, say, a 2-story, 6-unit townhomes in an older established neighborhood, there's all this neighborhood pushback. So we're feeling the pressure from constituents on that score as well. Some have indicated they're not going to support this. And as I said, others are kind of non-committal at this point. They want to see all the staff reports in a few weeks and make a decision based on all the information in front of them.
And they will make that decision when?
That is looking like they're going to make. It's looking like they're going to make that decision some point in December, I think, possibly November or December.
Okay. And in our last 30 seconds here, if the provincial government doesn't like the decision that Hamilton City Council comes up with, do they have any options in terms of setting it aside or anything like that?
The indication, for the latest indication from an official from the ministry is that it looks like if you're going to pursue the no boundary expansion option, it may not conform with provincial policy and the growth plan. So there definitely is a sense that the province may not approve the city's updated official plan if it is indicating a no boundary expansion option. So what that means in the end, I'm not entirely sure. There's been a suggestion that the province could simply rip up whatever the city chose and come up with its own plan. But at the same time, some planning experts have told me, well, the ministry has already indicated support for this boundary expansion of some 1,300 hectares. So that would likely be the worst case scenario that the city would have to face.
I think what it means is the plot thickens. And we thank you very much, Tevye, for coming on to TVO tonight and laying out the issues for us here on the agenda. Take good care.
Thanks very much.
Ontario's growth plan means that cities such as Hamilton have rules and requirements around building new housing to meet growing demand. But you can't just put hundreds or thousands of homes anywhere. And that's where things get sticky. Let's get into this with our guests, all of them in the hammer tonight. Lloyd Ferguson, Hamilton City Councillor for Ward 12, Ancaster. John Paul Danko, he's the Hamilton City Councillor for Ward 8, that's the West Central Mountain. Lily Noble is an advocate with the citizen group Stop Sprawl Hamont, as in Hamilton, Ontario. She's also a member of GASP, Grandmothers Act to Save the Planet. And Mike Collins-Williams is the CEO of the West End Home Builders Association. And as I welcome you all here, Mike, you and I are going to do a little dance off the top here because, well, let me ask, is there anybody who either is or has been, Mike, with your organization who may share the same last name as me?
Your brother is a member of our association and builds across the Hamilton and Burlington area.
And we put that on the record for everybody's full disclosure. Now, let's put a map up for starters here and just talk about we're going to focus on this area. And for those who are listening on podcast and can't see the map, I'll just describe it a little bit. What you are essentially looking at on the top part of this picture, that's the mountain. That's what everybody calls the mountain. You can tell, right, some of the north-south street names, Upper Paradise, Upper James, Upper Gage, Upper Ottawa. That's the mountain. And then looking south as well. And remember, in Hamilton, the water is north. So at the top of this map, past downtown, is Lake Ontario. The shaded areas that are gray, that's where development is currently allowed. The white areas, which is also known as the White Belt, that's currently farmland, and that's where the city is considering / debating whether or not to allow development in those areas. Now let's get everybody's position on, and obviously there's a lot more gray and there's a little bit of white, and the city's going to determine what's possible under the current circumstances. Let's get everybody's position on the record here. Lloyd Ferguson, should there be development allowed in those white belt spaces?
I'm still listening to that issue. Clearly, there's two sides on this issue, two very strong issues, but we're used to facing those kind of things. We've just dealt with the LRT, although we got 4 years of construction coming now. We're dealing with the Shadow Creek, all this encampment problem we have throughout the city, the Red Hill Valley Judicial Review, and now the urban boundary expansion. On each issue, there's always fors and against. So I'm going to continue listening. I've heard loud and clear from the no side, but I'm starting to hear a lot more from the yes side.
John Paul Danko, tell me your view on whether or not development should be allowed in those so-called white belt spaces.
No, I think we need to take a firm line and stop the growth pattern of sprawl development. And this is an issue that's facing municipalities across Ontario. And I think there's a new renewed interest in where we grow and how we grow as a municipality. And I think we need to grow up, not out.
Lily Noble, your view on this?
Hi. Absolutely, we don't need to use the White Belt right now. That is prime agricultural land that needs to be preserved for the future. Back in 2006, lots of land, 11,000 acres was brought into the urban boundary. We haven't used it up. So why would we include more? Is this just a land grab by developers who want to, make tons of money because land that's zoned agricultural, they buy it cheap, and then once it's zoned urban, they can make 10 times more money off of it. So we think it's just a land grab and it's unnecessary, and the sprawl that would occur is just too costly for Hamiltonians. Mike
Collins-Williams, your view?
I think we need a combination of solutions and a balanced approach. Hamilton needs to grow up, meaning that we do need significant increases in intensification, especially around transit and creating a new skyline in Hamilton. We need to build in, which means more missing middle housing within existing neighborhoods. And yes, we do need a small boundary expansion to accommodate a diversity of different housing typologies to meet the full life cycle needs of Hamiltonians.
Let me circle back now to Lloyd Ferguson, who did raise this issue a moment ago about a survey that was done indicating what people in the area wanted. Apparently, 18,000 residents responded to the survey, and 90% said, let's keep the boundary the way it is. In your view, Lloyd Ferguson, is that a strong enough consensus to help you make up your mind?
Well, we have a population now of about $365,000, so or 660,000 people, and 20,000, while significant, it's not a large piece of the population. A part that troubles me about these survey results is a number of them came with the exact same message, the same subject, the exact same message. And I've done some digging on it, and there's quite frankly, there's thousands of them. They come in at the exact same time every morning around 6:20, 6:25, hundreds at a time. But they, and as I drill down, I've asked staff to give us some update on this new technology that seems to exist for these special interest groups to garner support. And what it seems they're doing is that they craft a response, give the title to it, and then blast it out to all their contacts. And all the contact person has to do is put their name and address on it and hit send. Then it goes out to every member of council, every member of senior staff, and all the media.
So basically, you think the thing got stuffed. You think the ballot box got stuffed in some respects.
Well, that's a pretty strong way of saying it. But yeah, I need to understand it more because I'm not sure it's balanced. The only question they point out is, do you support using farmland for housing? And everybody, including me, would say no. But they don't get the balance to it, which worries me because there's a lot of downsides to the other option too. Our staff have recommended what the consultant has reviewed over the last number of months preparing this report, and they say you need a balance. You need about 50% urban boundary expansion and 50% intensification, particularly along the transit routes in the downtown corridor, and maybe even in other urban areas within the old city. It's a big issue for Ancaster because if we accept option one, which is no urban boundary expansion, it requires us to take the intensification rate up from 35 persons and places per hectare, persons and people per hectare, to 50, which is a 43% increase. The net result to Ancaster would be an additional 500 condo units. And I think it's important that the public understand the downside of going with no urban boundary expansion. The staff have told us that, yes, it is agricultural land, and yes, it's very precious, but it takes up about the 1,350 hectares that are being proposed, takes up about 2% of the rural land. Hamilton has a large rural contingent, a big chunk of my ward, about 90% of it's in the rural area. And so we do have an abundance of rural property that is producing crops, and it grows great crops. Corn, soybeans, and wheat are the three most popular. But I just wish that the message could get out to the public. You need to understand the pros and cons of both options so that it helped me make an informed decision.
Okay, I get you. Mike Collins-Williams, you heard some of the numbers there. Do you think Ancaster can accommodate that much additional development in your view?
I'm empathetic to both Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Denko that local control over planning is difficult. Fundamentally, they represent constituents, typically whom are homeowners rather than renters, who typically don't like much change in their neighborhoods. This is one of the most difficult things within planning. That the irony of this debate is, I think the only thing that people hate more than sprawl is intensification. And almost every single application comes down to a political vote at council. This makes the intensification targets that the city has set through both the ambitious scenario or a no boundary scenario extremely difficult to achieve. Our members are certainly building high density intensification projects along transit lines and trying to build missing middle housing within existing communities, but the missing middle is, well, it's missing. We have exclusionary zoning policies in Hamilton, and for that matter, right across the GTA in the city of Toronto, it's been termed the Yellow Belt, where only single-family homes are allowed to be built, and that covers most of the geographic area of the cities across South Central Ontario. This makes the politics around intensification extremely difficult. I'm not saying that our members are not up for continuing to intensify and build transit-oriented housing, but the fact that every single project comes down to a vote at council, that's a very difficult way of building the 1 million houses that are going to be required across the province of Ontario over the next decade to meet the very significant population growth that has actually been accelerating in the past few years.
Well, let me follow up with Lily Noble on that. How much of this dispute, do you think, Lily, is the fact that, a lot of people who live in existing neighborhoods just don't want their neighborhoods to change, period, full stop?
Well, I think if you look at how much land there hasn't been developed yet, there's room for more single-family homes, semi-detaches, and middle-density homes. So in one respect, I would say to Councillor Ferguson, who is my councillor, by the way, because I live in Ancaster as well, that there's room to grow in Ancaster. But the density, the real higher density and the middle density in the beginning should happen along the new LRT. This is a new thing that just was approved by council. A lot of money, $3.8 billion, has been invested to build that, and it shouldn't be running empty, right? We really need to have people living along it, because that's the way it works well, and people can benefit from it the most. So that whole idea that we have to densify in Ancaster, the limit is 3 stories. We should allow that. I agree with Mike about the exclusionary bylaw needing to be updated so that semis and the low density things can be built in neighborhoods with single density homes. That needs to change. Huge bungalows on huge lots, usually here they're torn down and a huge house for single family is built. And if somebody wants to build something different, a semi-detached, we should not make it so difficult to do. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to jump in with John Paul and say, I mean, essentially, this is a debate between 2 different factions. You got people who live in places right now who may just like things the way they are and don't want their neighborhoods changed in any significant way, versus those who want to move into what is a very fast-growing city and who need places to live and think to themselves, if we don't intensify or if we don't change the way things happen right now, I'm never going to be able to get a house in, for example, we're talking Hamilton, but this works for other cities as well. How do you, as a decision maker, resolve that conundrum?
There's no question in the city of Hamilton right now, we have an affordable housing crisis. The average family cannot afford the average family home, and that's a systemic problem that we're facing, and it's a problem that municipalities across Ontario are facing. Along with how do we intensify? Whether we set our intensification targets at 60% with an urban boundary expansion or 80% without an urban boundary expansion, we need to have the zoning policies and the City of Hamilton policies in place that enable that level of intensification, which historically we haven't hit. Right now, we're around 30 to 40% intensification. So if we're going to reach those infill densities, we do need to make sure that we prioritize new growth along those transit corridors, along the LRT corridor from McMaster to Eastgate Square, along the Upper James corridor in the area that I represent, which is already pre-zoned for significant growth. It's zoned for mixed use, residential, commercial, up to 8 stories. And right now it's primarily strip malls and car dealerships. So there's tremendous potential within the existing urban boundary for growth and to provide that choice of housing that we know residents are looking for.
All right, let me follow up with Lily on this. I heard you say earlier that you don't want that farmland as it is currently zoned to be developed, that we need that area for farmland. But my question to you is, the people who own those farms right now, I mean, that's their pension, and a lot of them don't want to farm anymore. They want to sell that land because farming's tough, and there's nobody else that they can sell their farm to who want to keep farming it. The big desire is for development. How do you tell people they can't sell their farms and have developers develop their land when they've got nobody else to sell to who will continue to farm the land?
Yeah, I would say that all the farmers we've talked to really don't want their farmland to go into becoming asphalt and homes. And there are lots of people out there who want to be farmers, actually. It's a new and booming industry, and they can't afford to buy the land because it's zoned or potentially zoned to be urbanized. And the prices are just astronomical for them to buy. But if you hold the boundary firm and say this land will be farmland forever, then the price will come back down. And then farmers can, buy this land. Right now, a lot of the farmland in an area called Elfrida, which is the biggest chunk of White Belt, a lot of that land is not owned by farmers. They're leasing it. It's owned by developers, and they're just waiting. They've been land banking for years waiting for this change in zoning. So a lot of the farmers we've talked to really are desperate. And when one farm disappears, it makes it difficult for the rest of them to continue because it's a farming industry and they need all the support from the companies that support farmers. And if farmers start disappearing one by one, those industries don't support farmers either.
Mike,
So,
can I get you to speak to that? Sorry, a little bit. I want to hear Mike on this because, there has been a great debate for decades as to whether or not we ought to allow development on what is, after all, dwindling land available for farming. What's your view on that?
If we take a 30,000-foot view and zoom out a little bit, because Hamilton is not an island unto itself. The population of the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the area stretching from Niagara to Barrie across to Peterborough, is just over 10 million today. It's projected to grow to 15 million people by 2051. This is the equivalent of the entire population of Greater Montreal moving to this region. Now, most of that population can be accommodated through intensification, but we are going to need small urban boundary expansions in specific areas where there is infrastructure and where it is close to city services so that we can build complete communities. In the case specifically of Hamilton, most of Hamilton is permanently protected in the Greenbelt. There's 836 square kilometers of land within Hamilton that is protected by the Greenbelt. And I'll say on your program on air that the West End Home Builders Association, we support the Greenbelt. That should be permanently protected. We're talking about 1.5% of the land area in Hamilton, 1,340 hectares that are part of the White Belt. The White Belt was set aside back in 2006 when the Greenbelt and the growth plan were originally brought in as a long-term urban reserve. It's essentially a relief valve for situations like we find ourselves in today, where we have a housing crisis and where Hamilton and other regions are planning for long-term growth. There are 236,000 people forecast to come to Hamilton in the coming 3 decades. And as Councillor Danko said, I think a lot of that can be accommodated through intensification. But for better or for worse, there are people that don't want to live in closer corridors or in intensification and are looking for other options. Nick Nanos Research just released a survey this morning taking a scientific methodology looking at the options for growth and found that 38% of Hamiltonians actually support a boundary expansion to accommodate future growth, whereas 32% supported a no boundary expansion, and 22%, well, they just don't want growth at all. They don't want intensification, they don't want a boundary expansion. And what's interesting about these numbers is that the side supporting the boundary expansion was actually higher for younger people. And these are the people struggling to get into the housing market and that are considering leaving Hamilton altogether. We're almost seeing a musical chairs effect stretching from Toronto to Hamilton and outwards, where people are scattering across the province looking for the housing type that they prefer. And we're in a strange situation where places like Tillsonburg and Shelburne are the fastest growing places in Ontario. These places were never planned to grow at the rate that they are, but people are looking for attainable and affordable housing. And if they can't find the housing of their preference, they will drive until they qualify, and they will drive vast distances to do so.
Mike, I should ask a follow-up question. Nick Nanos has a very good reputation as a good and reliable pollster, but I need to know the question that was asked that got back the results that say 38% for development, 32% against, and 22% zero. What was the question? I
conveniently have it right in front of me so I can read the question word for word. Hamilton is planning to accommodate another 236,000 people in the city by 2051. Thinking of ways to accommodate another 236,000 people in Hamilton, which of the following 3 approaches would you prefer? And the answers are randomized for each subsequent person that's been asked. Keep the boundary the same and fit an additional 236,000 people into the current Hamilton neighborhoods like your own, or allow for an expansion of the urban boundary to help accommodate 236,000 new residents in Hamilton, or slow down any change in new growth in Hamilton.
And that got you a
reputation.
Right, that got you a 6-point bump. Okay, so that got you a 6-point edge on the option that you actually favor.
We think that this is a much more representative sample of the average Hamiltonian versus the city survey in which 215,000 were mailed out. They only received 8,000 back by mail, and another 10,000 responses came through a particular website with a particular outlook.
John Paul, can I ask you, is that kind of information helpful to you to help you make your own mind up on this issue?
Well, I think it helps to explain to me exactly how the money from the development industry is able to influence policy decisions. You know, as that survey was put out by the development industry versus a citywide survey, again, with 18,000 responses, we're lucky if we get a couple hundred responses. So I'd love to know how many people actually responded to that survey. And the responses that we saw, this is an organic, grassroots organization and feeling throughout the city that's saying no to sprawl. We're seeing more lawn signs that say no sprawl, stop sprawl, than I did during the federal election campaign for the federal parties. Most of the results that we got back from the citywide survey were mailed in. So those are individual people who are taking the time to fill out a survey and put it in the mailbox.
Well, okay, let me just jump in for a second, because I hasten to, I mean, Nick Nanos obviously is not here, but he would hasten to add that if you survey 500 representative people on an issue, it is a more statistically reliable set of data you're going to get back than if you get 18,000 out of 500,000 people who are very passionate about the issue and may not be representative of anything other than themselves. That's a fair point, isn't it?
The fact is that the residents of the city Hamilton are extremely knowledgeable on this topic and very, very engaged. And those are alliances that typically don't agree. So we're seeing progressive urbanist type groups, we're seeing farmers associations, and we're seeing groups just from across the board coming together to say no urban boundary expansion.
All right, let me read something here, and Lloyd, I'll get you to comment on this first, because this is your neck of the woods we're talking about here. This is from Bob Motton, who is the head of the Ancaster Village Heritage Community, writing in the Hamilton Spectator last month. He wrote, "Ancaster Village Heritage Community is against urban sprawl and encroachments of development on precious farmland. We also favor reasonable, densifying development which adheres to current bylaws and zoning regulations and enhances the quality of life in our town. Both of these results are possible," says Bob. Lloyd, do you agree?
Well, I got a different view of that email, and I did read his op-ed in the Hamilton Spectator, and so he's coming out now and saying that they oppose an urban boundary expansion, but they support reasonable. I think I said reasonable intensification.
Yes.
There was an application about 3 months ago that came before the city of Hamilton for what's called 15 Church Street. It was a large, burned out single family home on a large lot. And a developer wanted to put in 6 really nice high-end townhouses. He met the height restriction of the 2.5 floors. He met all the setback requirements. And so I sense there's a demand for these smaller homes, townhouses in particular, inside the existing urban boundary, particularly in the downtown area, so people can walk. And so I supported it, as did council. I think it was unanimous. Council supported it. Mr. Matten has taken us off to the Land Tribunal, used to be the ALPAT, is now called the Ontario Land Tribunal, appealing that decision. And if that isn't reasonable intensification, I don't know what the heck is. So I don't understand him taking that view, supporting reasonable intensification, when he vehemently, through his own cost, is appealing this to the OMB. And one other thing I wanted to just get in here, the consultant recommendation, which the staff have endorsed and recommended to us, is for a 50-50 solution, 50% intensification and 50% urban boundary expansion. And while our inbox gets filled up and primarily with people that share a view and as you said, stuff the ballot box, I hear on the street, I hear in the coffee shops, I hear in the golf course, parents worried about their children. Their children don't want to live in an 800 square foot condo. It's okay for some, but not for all. And they're worried, how are they going to be able to have their dream home when if there's no place to build them? We do have an affordable housing issue in Hamilton. That's because there's very little land left or very little space left. There's pockets where we can intensify. And quite frankly, we've seen that. I believe it's 6 towers have been approved in 2021 for the downtown core, high towers. And there's more in the hopper on the way.
What defines a high tower in Hamilton?
About 30 floors.
30 stories, okay.
Yeah, because our planning act says it can't be any higher in the escarpment. It can't block the view. And that's how we establish that number.
Gotcha.
And more importantly, the thing that troubles me the most is when I drive around and look at this proliferation signs, and there is a lot of them, stop urban sprawl. They're on single family homes. So they have their dream home, but they don't want the future to have theirs.
Well, let me ask Lily about that. That's a good point. Again, I'm going to use Bob's words from his op-ed. He says reasonable densifying development should be okay. What does that look like in your view?
Right. Well, I want to speak to the survey results that Lloyd has been mentioning. Those results came from city residents from every single ward, and many of them, the highest density came from wards 1, 2, and 3. And actually, the third highest results for option 2 of no boundary expansion came from Ancasterites. So yes, a lot of them are sitting in single family homes. You won't see them in apartments because apartments are too high up to see our signs. But I just want to emphasize that the survey results that the city collected are from people who we have spent months educating about the costs of sprawl, and they don't want to have to pay the extra costs because cities will pay more for the sprawl. They don't want a loss of farmland. They want food security, and they want to fight climate change too. So if you're talking about people who are concerned and motivated and passionate, then that's the 18,000 people who replied to the city survey, not the 700 who maybe had 3 minutes on a telephone poll and you were just asked, do you want somebody, building a tower next door to you? So I think if you educate Hamiltonians, they clearly came out and said, we want better transit. We want affordable homes in the city, not far away. You don't build affordable housing miles and miles away from.
Okay, but Lily, let me
else.
Forgive me. We're down to our last few minutes here, and I do want to make sure that you get a chance to speak on the record for whether or not you are in favor of, quote, reasonable densifying development.
Well, sure. And to Bob's point, the house he was trying to preserve was a heritage house. So that changed his outlook because he's a heritage guy.
No, it was not.
Well, that's what I heard. So yes, reasonable density is fine. And it should be, we should first fill up the underutilized space in Hamilton. There's tons of it. Let's do that first. People don't like boarded up buildings. They want vibrant communities. And the people have spoken, and we don't want forward bullying councillors across Southern Ontario so that all this land is pushed into the urban area when it's unnecessary and dangerous and expensive.
Are you okay with changes to existing neighborhoods?
Well, if it means it's in the character and you can have 3 stories and they're the same height as everything else, but it's now 2 homes instead of 1, then sure.
All right. One of the reasons that we're having you all on TVO tonight is that while this is obviously a big debate in the city of Hamilton, the issues are really quite universal and are taking place in cities all over this province. And so, Mike, maybe you could just get us started here on a bit of a discussion about what you have learned that relates to the Hamilton situation that really, decision makers in other cities across this province ought to be wary of as well.
My professional background is a planner, and we often learn that the local interest is not necessarily the public interest. And this is critical when it comes to planning for a region in which Hamilton is not an island unto itself. We have a provincial growth plan that defines where we should be growing, and we have a provincial greenbelt plan that defines what we should be protecting. And the challenge is that if Hamilton makes decisions on its own, not to grow in a balanced manner, that meets the land needs assessment, which is based on sort of market demand, because the fact of the matter is not everybody wants to live in an apartment. Hamilton will displace people elsewhere. A recent report by Mike Moffat found that over the last 5 years, 15,000 families have actually left Hamilton to move down the QEW to St. Catharines or up the 403 to Brantford. Another Mike Moffat study by the Smart Prosperity Institute found that over the last year, 60,000 residents on net left Toronto and Peel in search of affordable housing elsewhere. So there is a cascading effect that is affecting basically from the CN Tower heading outwards, where folks are driving until they qualify. And it's a bit like a cruel game of musical chairs, as I said earlier, that when the music stops, unfortunately, there are far too many people looking for far too few houses, and that is pushing people further and further away. This is why we have provincial policy underneath the Planning Act, the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, and the Greenbelt. And unfortunately, when it comes to local political decisions, there's nobody that speaks for the future residents. It is all focused on the existing residents.
Well, let me ask in our last minute here, John Paul Danko, who is a local political decision maker, what he's learned about this situation that could be applicable to other municipalities in the province.
Well, over the past 3 years, the Ford government has put in planning policy at the provincial level that basically ensures urban boundary expansions. They've changed the market, the population projections for for cities, which are inaccurate and inflated. They've introduced the market approach, which basically ensures status quo single-family homes are the preferred growth option. And they've changed the planning timeline to 2051 from 2041. So obviously, if you make the planning horizon long enough, you're going to ensure that cities have to grow their boundaries. And finally, the official policy from the province is that prime agricultural land should be protected. It should not be used to build housing. And that's what we're talking about in Hamilton. All of the land that we're talking about expanding our urban boundary is some of the best farmland in Canada. And according to the province's own policy, that land should be protected for farming.
It's a great debate, everybody, and we thank you for having it on TVO tonight. I know other municipalities are watching as well. City Councillors John Paul Danko and Lloyd Ferguson, Mike Collins-Williams from the West End Home Builders Association, Lily Noble from Stop Sprawl Hammont. Good of all of you to join us on TVO tonight. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a very tough year plus for everyone, and according to the latest from the Toronto Foundation's annual Vital Signs report, it really amplified difficulties that people were already having. Joining us now to explain, in Pickering, Ontario, Garima Talwar Kapoor. She is Director of Policy and Research at Maytree, an anti-poverty nonprofit. And in Ontario's capital city, right downtown at Yonge and Bloor, there's Julia Howell, who is the Chief Program Officer for the Toronto Foundation. And it's nice to see both of you back on TVO tonight. Let me just take a moment here and go through some of the highlights of the Vital Signs report. For example, a quarter of the people in Ontario's capital city are struggling to make ends meet. That is 650,000 people in the city of Toronto. Shelter use increased in June 2021, right after the eviction ban ended. 56,000 people are relying on food banks. There is limited to no affordable rental availability for the bottom 40% of earners, and all of this during a time that saw unprecedented wealth creation in the housing and stock markets. Julia, get us started here. How much of this increase in inequality, in your judgment, was because of the pandemic?
There's no doubt about it that the pandemic has made the situation so much worse. We knew about our growing inequality. We've been tracking it for 4 or 5 years through Vital Signs, but COVID exacerbated everything. We saw huge increases in net worth of Canadians with a record 1.8 trillion. And at the same time, as your graphic just showed, 1 in 4 Torontonians is struggling just basically to make ends meet. And there are lots of other... Sorry,
I was just going to ask Garima to follow up on that. Any question in your mind that the pandemic exacerbated the circumstances that were already difficult for too many?
Absolutely not. I think it's what the pandemic has done is made it absolutely clear that these inequalities exist and that the grave cleavages that we see across neighborhood lines, across income lines, across race and ethnicity lines, and the converging impacts of all of these has been made profoundly more clear through the pandemic.
Julia, there's one part of the report some people might find curious, and that is it said that more people accessed food banks in Ontario's capital city in 2021 than in 2020. That despite the fact that presumably more people are vaccinated, more people are going back to work, more people theoretically ought to be better off. Why would that be?
Well, we're just speculating, of course, but presumably people had friends and family and others that they might be able to rely on in a pinch. But as unemployment continued and precarious work grew, people's situations became more dire and they had no choice but to go to a food bank.
Can I also, Garima, follow up with you on the CERB, which is an acronym everybody, of course, in Canada knows now, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. $2,000 a month to people who lost their jobs as a result of the pandemic. And the report points out that that is a much more generous benefit than, say, ODSP, the Ontario Disability Support Program, or Ontario Works, so-called welfare. What do you infer from all of that?
Well, I think, first of all, it's really important to know that people who receive social assistance were less likely to benefit from a program like CERB than other unemployed Canadians. And that's because of the eligibility criteria that CERB had. And so when we think about who is showing up at food banks, who is showing up at our shelters, it's really important to note that the people that live in deepest poverty across Canada did not benefit from federal income supports. And so when we think about, the $2,000 in CERB per month that was available to recipients, I think it tells us something about what, as a government and as people, we think the bare necessity is needed to live a life with dignity. The ODSP rates for a single adult in Ontario is $1,169, and for a single adult on Ontario Works or receiving Ontario Works, their maximum benefit is $733 a month, which is woefully short of that $2,000. But I would hazard to say, as much, we definitely need to increase the rates for people living in deep poverty and receiving social assistance. But as we've seen through the pandemic, public services really matter to people. And as we think about increasing the rates that are available through our income support programs, we also need to think about a holistic package of public services that are available to everybody who needs them.
Julia, I guess I should point out that the CERB is a federal program, while ODSP and Ontario Works are provincial programs. And every provincial government, in my memory, has always said, the feds have got the money printing machine, so they can afford to be more generous in what they do. We can't really be that generous as a province. What's your view on that?
Well, there's one person that's struggling in the end, and that's what we have to remember. So I think it's high time we all just got together and accepted that there's a growing underclass in this city that needs help. And whether it's federal supports, provincial supports, municipal supports, or indeed the charitable sector, we all need to care about this growing issue because it impacts on all of us.
Garima, do you sense any political will to, now that we've seen what CERB can do, to increase the allocations that go to people who need this support going forward?
That's a really interesting question, Steve. And, trying to not put my jaded hat on, I really do hope that there is a willingness to think through, intergovernmental collaboration on how we increase income supports for people living in poverty. We know through the Canada Child Benefit, through the Guaranteed Income Supplement for seniors, that a base benefit of supports for these groups has really helped to reduce poverty. And so what I would say is that we know that single adults across Canada face the highest rates of living in poverty. And so what I would encourage is a federal benefit that really supports low income working age singles, and so that we develop that, that suite of targeted incomes at different demographic groups, and then ones that can supplement and stack on top of benefits like social assistance, so that we don't just have one benefit that is provided to everyone, but a suite of benefits and a diversity of benefits that is reflective of the diversity of need across Canada, across Ontario, and across Toronto.
Anybody in the federal government thinking about that right now, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, no, but that doesn't mean that they aren't acutely aware of the issues that exist. And so what we're all hoping to do is push the federal government to really recognize that the world, that the labor market that exists today is fundamentally different than the one that existed 2 or 3 decades ago. And so this idea that people need to be incentivized into work or need to be discouraged to remain on supports is reflective of a labor market that didn't have the underbelly of precarity existing. And so now that we know that the nature of work, especially for low and moderate income workers, is precarious, and that there's a lot of churn in the labor market, people that go into income supports and then come back off and then go back in. We need innovative thinking when it comes to income supports, and it requires the federal government to extend their arm and their hand in doing this. And I do hope that, like we've seen on other files in housing, for example, that other orders of government will be happy to take the help where they can.
Well, let me pick up on housing and going back to the Vital Signs report. Julia, you've talked about shelters, and I wonder if during the course of the pandemic, what the status of shelter space availability to people who needed that space, what was it like?
Well, we remember at the beginning of the pandemic when shelters, of course, like everywhere, had to enact social distancing measures. There were fewer beds. Tent encampments grew. There were 80 encampments across the city, so it was a very glaring reality for all of us that homelessness was an issue we had to pay attention to. Of course, the city, shut those down, and there's been a growth in hotel spaces made available. So it shows that there's been some adaptability in the system, which I think is a positive thing. There have been all sorts of solutions posed to address what's been a long-term crisis in available housing and affordable housing. And, we're optimistic that we're going to see some changes here that'll be long-term and will ensure that people can live in dignity, as Garima mentioned.
Well, the time has flown by here. We're literally down to our last minute and a half here. And Garima, let me give it to you to speak to this. People may feel that the problems are so profound, there just aren't solutions out there. And I'm wondering if you believe there are policy levers that can be pulled in order to help solve some of these issues we've been talking about.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I often think that people think, oh, we've tried everything that's out there, and we haven't. What I often think is that, especially when it comes to housing, we need to think about regulation as much as we think about investments. We need to think about supply side ideas to increase the supply of affordable and deeply affordable housing, but we also need to think about demand side solutions that help people pay their rent, that help people who are in arrears from their rent to help stabilize their tenancies. And so, at the City of Toronto over the past week, there has been a lot of criticism lobbed at the City of Toronto when it comes to their failure to vote to legalize rooming houses across the city. That doesn't mean that this work is over. In fact, at the City of Toronto at the end of this month, we've got a vote coming up on inclusionary zoning, which will require developers to have certain amounts and proportions of the units that they develop dedicated to affordable housing. And that's on the regulatory side that the city can do today. We know that that with the federal government and with the municipalities, that there's a lot of investment in modular housing and the rapid housing initiative. I think that it's high time that we think of the role of housing as a public service and how we increase the number of publicly funded homes that we actually have across the province. There's a federal lands initiative that exists. The province, has been a bit meek in its role in promoting affordable housing, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a role to play and that it's too late for them to play a role. I think that a Scotiabank report said that we are in a housing supply shortage of 1.8 million homes. A recent report by Mike Moffat across Ontario noted a shortage of 1 million homes. And the question is, what type of homes are we building and for who are we building? And once we start to ask those questions and we start to think about the regulatory nature and the investments that need to take in place, that need to be made in tandem, I do think that this housing crisis that we're in can be mitigated and can be resolved, but it requires courage and it requires out-of-the-box thinking that brings people along, which, I'm really hopeful that we're finally there to do that.
Well, we cover the Vital Signs Report, I think, pretty much every year on this program because it has always got important information in it to give you the sense of the pulse of what's going right and wrong in Ontario's capital city. So we thank the Toronto Foundation for that, and we thank Garima and Julia for coming on our program tonight to talk about it. Well done, you two.
Thank you.
And that is the agenda for Wednesday, October 13th, 2021. COVID-19 has been a heavy lift for our public health care system as it tries to catch up on massive backlogs. Tomorrow, we'll explore whether it's time to test some solutions that emerge from the private sector. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.